grandparent, Deda Hus. He's my special guest this morning on the Super Morning Show. Uh, Ambassador Deda Hus, I'd like to say a pleasant good morning to you and welcome to the Super Morning Show this morning.
Thank you very much, Varfle. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Bonjour à tous.
Thank you. It is my pleasure as well. And just some weeks ago, just in the seat you are sitting, the United States, your colleagues, the U.S. ambassador, Ambassador Michael McCarthy, and the Chinese ambassador. So for me, it is a great pleasure for me to be speaking with you at this time. But you have a great African orientation because as I read your profile, you come from the French diplomatic service, of course. You previously served twice as French ambassador to Burundi. Is that true?
Burundi and Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe, Malawi, but you were based in Harare.
Yes.
And you were also posted in Pretoria, South Africa. Yes, so it's not Africa. It's of course not strange to you. Is Africa your second home? You think?
Thanks.
Every place I spend 3 years or 4 years in is my second home, and my home at the moment is Monrovia. I've always felt at home in whichever country I was, and it's true that I've developed a particular taste for Africa, for the African continent, for Africans, for problematics of Africa, and very happy to be on the continent.
Great. So, as head of the European Union delegation to Liberia, I recalled very well. You presented your letters of credence on October 16, 2020. So, 2 years now, as we speak, you've been in Monrovia, Liberia. Do you love it here?
I do. My wife and I love it. We love our private life here. We've made tremendous friends. We are very fortunate to have a very comfortable life here in Liberia, unlike many people in the country. But we also, I particularly enjoy the job.
Okay.
It's to head a European Union delegation rather than just a French embassy is for me definitely a new challenge. To work with colleagues from 9 different nationalities in the delegation, to be to represent one development partners of Liberia, to work with my colleagues from the European bilateral embassies, with Sweden, with Germany, with Ireland, with France, to develop and animate this network of this Team Europe, as we like to call it, is a formidable challenge, and it's a pleasure every day. I really go to the office every morning with a lot of happiness.
Great. So let's begin, Mr. Ambassador, with understanding the European Union. I do a lot of followings of the West, of the EU, of various bilateral and multilateral organizations. But let's understand the European Union and the principles and the values and what it stands for.
The European Union first stands for peace. The EU was created after the Second World War. It was created on the blood and the loss and the suffering of millions of victims of the Second World War, also of the First World War. And it was led by the decision of the former foes, of the former enemies, rather than to destroy each other, to build something new together and to build a common Europe. So the basis of the creation of Europe, let us not be mistaken, is not the economy, is not the single market, is not prosperity, it is peace.
Okay.
And to achieve that peace, the founding fathers of the European Union had this brilliant idea to put together 2 commodities, steel and coal. And why did they choose 2 commodities? It's because with steel and coal, you make guns, you make weapons. They figured out that if the founding members of the EU, there were 6 countries in the beginning, put together their production of steel, they would not be able to develop a military industry to fight each other. Okay. And that's how the single market, the common market rather, for coal and steel was established. After that, the market was developed to more products. We started with the agricultural policy to support self-subsistence of Europe in terms of food. Let's remember that at the outset of the Second World War, a lot of European countries were in a very, very bad situation, pretty much like Liberia in 2003 after the Civil War here. And so everything had to be rebuilt, and they decided to rebuild it together in a spirit of peace and to bring about reconciliation between the former foes. France and Germany led the way. France and German politicians led the way, but also the French and the German people, the French and the German youth. Institutions were created to develop this sense of belonging to a same continent, to a same European family, and to a same challenge of building together a common future. There's been huge developments in the European Union since then, and we can say that today the EU has extended in its geography, in its number of members. We are 27 members.
27. It was 28, but
it was 28. But unfortunately, the United Kingdom decided to.
Was it a setback?
It was definitely a setback for everyone. It was a setback for the EU because we lost a very powerful and important member state. We lost a very influential and powerful partner in foreign security policy. The UK lost a lot, and I wonder if today, if a referendum was to be hosted again in the UK
will come back.
They might decide otherwise.
Anyway, but we speak at the time, I suppose, Mr. Ambassador, that the EU right now is in one of its most difficult moments with the Russian war in Ukraine. Because
the Russian unjustified aggression and unprovoked aggression.
It is your justification and how you describe it. But because bulk of your members are heavily relying on Russian oil and gas, because of that, you're in a very difficult situation. You're supporting Ukraine, of course, but you also suffering the economic consequence of this.
Well, we're at war. We're officially not at war because there is no war declaration between the EU and Russia, obviously, and because I think none of the parties involved want this conflict to escalate. Okay. There are consequences. There are stringent economic consequences with the loss of supply, as you mentioned, of energy to Europe, but we are finding alternative suppliers. We are pushing the necessary economies in using fossil fuels. It's true that I'm flying to Paris for Christmas with my family and my kids. Next week, I'm going to use a lot of pullovers because I think at home it's going to be much colder than it was last week. But that's the price to pay. And of course, it's going to be even more difficult for the Ukrainians with the systematic destruction by Russia of energy-producing infrastructure.
Okay, Ambassador De La Hoz, let's come back home. Liberia. Liberia-European Union partnership began in 1973. Almost 50 years now. Looking back at the partnership, do you think the relationship has grown from strength to strength?
Yes, it does. It definitely has. The EU has been a trustworthy, stable partner for Liberia. Okay. We have had very good relations with the successive governments. Of course, there was a parenthesis during the Civil War, but things picked up very quickly after the Civil War. The EU participated in the reconstruction of the country. The European Investment Bank was one of the major partners for the reconstruction of the Mount Coffee hydropower plant. The EU has financed, I think, a large majority of the road network in Liberia. We are contributing to the extension, for instance, of the electricity network. In Monrovia, all those electrical poles that you see along Tubman Boulevard, for instance, are financed by the EU. We are going to kickstart very soon the extension of the electricity network to Buchanan, to Greenville, and to other coastal cities of Liberia. So the EU has been there with the successive governments of Liberia, contributing to the financing of the development of the country. And this in the framework established by the government.
Okay.
We are working through the Pro-Poor Agenda for Prosperity and Development at the moment. There will be an election next year. We will see who comes after, if it's still the same administration or if it's a new administration. In any case, we will inscribe our actions into the strategy.
The development strategy.
The development strategy of the government in place.
Okay. Okay, now, Ambassador, we will talk more about specifics into your development initiatives in Liberia. Clearly, the European Union's, clearly explained for us the European Union's development model to Liberians. Liberians actually have huge admiration for their country's development, international development partners, but they have little knowledge about how these supports are modeled. Can you clearly explain for us how the EU supports Liberia and how it's modeled?
Yes, it's true that we receive day after day hundreds of requests for financial support coming from many partners in Liberia, many NGOs, many people. This is not how we work. We don't give a little bit of money to everyone who writes to us. We work within a strategy that is developed with the government and that is focused on a limited number of topics because we want to be transformational in what we do. Rather than scattering our development funds on a wide variety of priorities, we prefer to focus and to bring more money to a limited number of subjects. Liberia has many international partners, has many international friends. There are enough partners to support what the government of Liberia decides to do. For instance, at the moment, there is a strong push, obviously, for the development of the road network, which is a major handicap for the development of Liberia. The EU has done a lot in that sector. We've decided to move away to do other things. And there are new partners that are brought in to support the road networks. For instance, I see that the government is in discussion with partners from the Arab states, and I hope that these discussions prove fruitful. There are already some roads. I think the RIA road is financed by Arab funds, and I think that's very good. Liberia needs many friends. We'll work with many friends. What we decide on the EU side is to focus, as I said, on a limited number of priorities.
But very important.
But very important, and this in partnership and in discussion and with the agreement of the government.
Okay.
For our new program, we are starting a new program because we work with programs that are 7 years long. We've just finished the program ending in 2020. We are starting a new program from 2021 until 2027.
Okay.
And this program is focused broadly on three main priorities. One is agriculture and nutrition.
Okay.
One is forestry and biodiversity. One is everything that has to do with governments. And I would say soft topic, public finance management, gender issues, and others, but we regroup them under the title governance.
So you said that you model your development strategy in accordance with the certain government of the day. Who recommends these specific areas?
Well, we discuss with our headquarters. First we look at the necessities, the needs of the country. We look how the EU, in its own international priorities, can satisfy those needs.
Okay.
For instance, I mentioned roads. At the moment, the EU does not do roads.
Okay.
It's not part of the global strategy of the EU. We prefer to focus on other topics. We have a global strategy of the EU called the Global Gateway, which aims to answer the needs and requests of our development partners. And we have figured out that one of the main issues in Liberia is the problem of nutrition.
Okay.
Liberia imports, the figures vary, but between 70 or 60 and 80%, let's say, of its agriculture. We know the situation about rice. It's been in the headlines for a very long time. It has had in the past major political consequences for Liberians. And we have decided with the Ministry of Industry to work on the development of an indigenous rice sector on the rice value chain, from the rice field to the fork, to the consumer.
Okay.
And this has been decided before the last rice crisis and before the Ukraine war.
Okay.
So we have figured that out, and of course the development of history and of events has proved us right in
So
choosing
that-
to focus on that sector. The levels of malnutrition are unfortunately bad in Liberia,
Okay.
and therefore that's one point of focus for us. The second point of focus, forestry and biodiversity. Why have we chosen that? We have a history with working with the Forestry Development Authority. The EU has been a major partner with the United Kingdom, with Norway and others to support the preservation and the sustainable management and exploitation of the forest. The idea is not to stop cutting trees. Liberia needs to export timber. It brings resources to the country, but it needs to do it in a sustainable way.
Yeah.
The level of deforestation is very high in your country. It's close to 2% a year. So if things are not put under control, in a few years, in a few generations, there will be no forest left. Liberia hosts 40% of the Upper Guinean rainforest, which is the lung of West Africa. So Liberia is the host of a forest that has a global role, a global importance. It's not only an issue for the communities living in the forest, or for the people of Liberia, or for the people of West Africa, of the people of Africa. It's an issue for the human race, the conservation of the of the Upper Guinean rainforest. We have been supporting it for a long time. There's still a lot to do. There are a lot of issues around governance of the forest, around finding alternative livelihoods for people who, for the moment, live from the forest, but in an unsustainable way. The people who walk around with chainsaws and cut woods to make a living. We need, for instance, to try to reverse the thing, instead of taking people who destroy trees and the forest, to make them into conservationists, people who will protect the forest, into rangers, into people who can guide tourists and present the immense biodiversity that you have in this forest. This is what we will focus on
in the next 7 years.
In the next 7 years. These are the
But
two.
you've
and
gone-
these two topics, the nutrition and agriculture, food value chain on the one side, and forestry and biodiversity on the other side. We are not only going to do it as the European Union delegation, we're going to do it with our member states in a format of Team Europe.
Okay.
So the French, the Swedish, the Germans, the Irish will pool resources with us to work on these two topics, and the actions that they are implementing will complement the EU action. And of course, we'll work in partnership with other countries on forestry. Despite Brexit, we continue to work hand in hand with the British government, who is also very active. We are doing a lot of calls to the Norwegian government to remain active and to develop its own activities in Liberia. So there is a host of partners. The World Bank is joining the move, etc.
As we speak, are they in full swing, or it hasn't started yet?
Some of them have started.
For example, the agriculture, food and nutrition.
The agriculture, we have already started. We are promoting, for instance, project. I love these projects. I call them sushi projects, because the idea is to grow simultaneously rice and fish.
Okay.
To use the rice fields, the water in the rice fields, as a habitat for tilapia fish that can be farmed and eaten. So you have you can make sushi. That's why I call them the sushi product. I know sushi is not part of the Liberian
traditional,
diet,
yeah.
but that's a pun that we use to describe those projects. We also already work on cocoa. We already work on cassava, and so we are going to intensify this. On agriculture, the idea is to work on the value chain, is also to convince young Liberians that farming is a business, that you can make a very good living out of farming, that you can make a fortune out of farming if you're very clever and very good. For the young Africans, for the young Liberians, there are other things to do than wash motorbikes or drive a keke. Being a farmer is not something only for your grandmother or for your mother in the village. Young people can contribute and become entrepreneurs in the farming sector. And we intend, with the Ministry of Agriculture, with the Ministry of Finance and other stakeholders, to work on that.
Okay. And
Another topic, sorry, I wanted to mention, you asked me, are you doing any new things? Another one that we have started already is TVET.
TVET.
TVET, training and
TVET, and I was just coming there because I was one of the presenters of, or lead presenter of TVET on radio, on the LBC. Some last year I presented it. And I interacted with most of these TVET students and the professionals as well. Is it paying off? Are your interventions paying off? Are they paying the dividend?
I think they are definitely. We in the first phase of our program, that is now finishing and we're starting the second phase. First phase of our program was to develop TVET schools in half the counties.
Okay.
Now, the schools, this program started 18 months ago or something like that. So not all the schools are already operating, but we know the benefits of TVET. I mean, I went to visit the ArcelorMittal plant of mines in Nimba. They have a formidable TVET school to train the people that they employ, and we work in partnership also with that school. So TVET works because the trainings that are given to young professionals in these schools will be adapted to the necessities of the job market. We're not gonna train nuclear physicists. We want to train plumbers. We want to train electricians. We want to train mechanics. We want to train people who will be guaranteed to find a job. One of the TVET schools is done in partnership with the private sector and will train people for the specific needs of the private sector.
Okay.
So the second phase of our program will be to finish covering the remaining 7 or 8 counties that have not been covered in the first phase.
Okay.
And this is something we do also with Sweden, one of our member states.
I will ask you
France. Sorry.
Okay, I will ask about these projects if they are directly implemented by government agencies and ministries, or you hired private firms to do them.
It depends.
So what is what?
It depends. There are many diverse implementing partners. In some cases, we work directly with government departments, like, for instance, TVET. The TVET facilities are housed into secondary schools. And so our partners there are the Minister of Youth and Sports and the Minister of Education. The program is implemented partly by UNIDO, international organization, and the local government.
Okay.
In other cases, we work with the private sector, or we work with NGOs or CSOs. So it depends on the type.
So it's a combination of both.
It's a
private and
it's
public.
a combination of private, of NGOs, CSOs, and of public. We have the 3 types of implementing partners, and the 4th type, which is also the United Nations, of course, the UN agencies. So it's really all different types of stakeholders that are involved in the development policy of a country with which we work.
Okay, so we'll weigh in on more on the impacts, but let's come to energy. With the switching on of the CLSG electricity grid, how huge is that for the energy sector of Liberia? I saw you part of that switching on ceremony. How do you describe it?
Yes, I was last Thursday at the switching on of the connection of Liberia to the CLSG, because the EU financed the CLSG. It's one of the main suppliers of funds for this regional project through the European Investment Bank and a loan to the CLSG. The same morning, by the way, all of us present at the inauguration of CLSG were at the ministerial complex to launch a conference, a forum, to bring private investors into the electricity sector, because we feel that the electricity sector in Liberia is now mature enough to attract funding from the private sector. Up to now, funding has come only from development partners and the government of Liberia.
Okay.
Now there is space in there for private entrepreneurs to come to finance a solar plant, to finance a distribution company. So CLSG will bring very much needed additional energy, electricity resources to the country, particularly in the dry season. During the wet season, Mount Coffee more or less can cover the needs. The bridging is done by these gasoline power plants, the small power plants on Bushrod Island, but the cost of operating those is absolutely huge. So CLSG Power...
It's a rescuer there.
It's a rescuer. It's a rescuer for the country, and if you've seen the power lines, you see that they are stringed only on one side. So it means that the line can double its capacity once further investments are done. So it's a huge investment for, I don't know, the next 50 years or the next century in Western Africa.
So there are rooms for more investment.
Definitely.
To build capacity?
Of course.
Okay.
To build capacity. There are a lot of consumers in Liberia who are not yet connected to the grid, in particular big industrial plants, who for the moment have relied on generators because the power delivered by LEC was not considered safe enough. I mean, in terms of regularity, because of power cuts, power shortages, etc. So they prefer to rely on generators. But I was speaking the other day with a good friend of mine who is the managing director of one of these big industrial companies, and he told me that he wanted to get in touch with Moni Captain at LEC, if I could arrange to put them in touch, because they want now to switch on to the national grid, because the power coming from LEC is cheaper than having to run generators. They can have the generators as a security, like many of us do when we are fortunate enough in our houses, but it's much cheaper to purchase power from LEC.
Okay, Ambassador, are you concerned about the sustainability of these projects, especially the CLSG? Will you recommend something of sustainability?
No, I think provided that these projects are managed in a transparent and efficient way, they have all the recipes for success.
Okay.
There were some worries emerging among the international community a few months ago about the situation of power in Liberia. And then we had a very good meeting with His Excellency the President during the month of May. And the government presented to development partners a strategy to fix the problem. And we see today the implementation of that strategy, the connection to CLSG, the payment of some areas that were due to Côte d'Ivoire, programs to extend Mount Coffee power plant, programs on introducing solar, fixing some issues, technical issues with turbines at Mount Coffee, doing maintenance operations that were not financed up to now in the safety small power plants on Bushrod Island, etc., etc. We really fully trust that under the leadership, the new leadership of LEC, with this firm determination and commitment on the part of the government of Liberia, things are going the right way.
Okay, if you just joined us, you're listening to the Super Morning Show on ELBC Radio. My guest this morning is the head of the European Union delegation to Liberia, Ambassador Laurent Delahousse. He's my guest. My name is Vafle Kamara. Mr. Ambassador, we've talked a lot about these different areas that the European Union is supporting our country. But in terms of monetary value, let's say, for example, annually, how much does the EU spend on Liberia in all of these development areas?
It's actually quite difficult to say because we work in a multi-annual way. What I can say is that the first tranche of support from the European budget to Liberia is 191 million euros for the first 3 years, let's say, of our program.
That was when?
What was when?
For the next 3 years. So when
That's for 2022, 2023, 2024.
Okay.
And then there will be a second tranche
Oh,
after
okay.
2024.
Okay.
The amount has not been decided yet. We are another way to answer is that we have prepared a first set of programs, 4 programs that we have agreed upon with the government, which represent 80 million euros. So it's pretty much 80 million US dollars at today's rate. It was 100 million dollars a few months ago before the Russian attack on Ukraine. We are preparing a second packet of programs of also 80 million euros. So you could say that EU support is between 50 and 70 million a year, more or less. To that, you need to add, of course, the support coming from our member states. Sweden is a major contributor also to the development of Liberia. At the moment, Swedish operations, I think, are a little bit higher even than that of the European Union. You have the French, you have the Irish, you have the Germans. So all in all, added together, European Union and its member states support to Liberia is not so far from your first development partner, which is the United States.
Okay.
And way ahead of others, in particular China.
Mr. Ambassador, so the EU does this thing as a union, but individual member states do their own thing.
On some aspects, they do their own thing. On some aspects, they do it with us in a Team Europe. For instance, agriculture and forestry, that's Team Europe. But when bilateral states do their own thing, it's inside the framework developed by the government of Liberia, and it's in coordination with other partners. When we work on SGBV, when we work together
On FGM, for example.
to support the end of FGM in Liberia, we do it all together. This is done with the Ministry of Gender. This is done with NACEL and the traditional chiefs. This is done with the CSOs. This is done in order to find a way for Zoes to find their interest in stopping the cutting and having their livelihoods and their financial resources maintained after that. So it's a strategy. FGM is not something you can end by just declaring it's illegal. Because as the Minister of Justice once said, we could declare it illegal, but then we cannot put a policeman in each of the villages to prevent the bush schools from reappearing in a clandestine situation. So it has to be done with every partner involved. And
For the fact that it is a livelihood for some people.
But there are many things that are a livelihood for people. I mean, it's not because.
But once people's
it's not
lives
because,
are
it's not
hinged
because a robber makes a livelihood out of robbing that robbing is respectful. Traditions are very important for Liberia.
No, my point is, once people's livelihoods are tied to something particular, it's hard to
Yes,
just
that's
get rid
why.
of
That's
it.
absolutely. That's
Yeah.
why we need. That's why. Well, first, many zoos, their livelihood is based on the traditional culture that they are promoting and bringing to the little girls or the little boys in Liberia. It's not only the cutting; it's also the rest. I'm told it's mainly
Yeah.
the cutting. But these women, we need to help them find another livelihood. There is a strong call from them that we hear and that we will support to, for instance, be able to find a livelihood from farming.
Yeah.
This is something that they want to do. If we can find ways all together to make it sustainable for them to stop the cutting, we will support that. But that does not mean that the cutting is justified. The fact that it's a livelihood is not a justification for the cutting. This is a barbaric practice.
Yep.
This is something that disgraces the traditions, the noble and beautiful traditions of Liberia. This is something that needs to be stopped as soon as possible, because every day lost in the fight against FGM is a broken life for too many little girls in Liberia.
Okay, so Mr. Ambassador, given all of the projects we've talked about and touched on the impacts of those projects, the results, do you really think that the results of these projects that you are not taking, what is, we say it's a combination of CSOs, the NGOs, and the government, do they worth the money spent on these projects? Do they worth the results?
Yes, of course. They are definitely worth the results. If not, we would stop immediately. All the projects we do are submitted to evaluations. There is a financial evaluation which compares the results to the money that is invested, and if the money is spent according to financial rules. And there's also a political control over the projects. If money invested in development was lost, I can tell you that our politicians, our budget authorities, the European Parliament, the national parliaments would not allow it to continue. We are proud of what we are doing. We know that what we are doing is very helpful, and we are determined to continue to do it. What we need to work on, specific area, is the sustainability. Too often, an investment, a project, an operation, a company will collapse when the financial support coming from development partners or from the government is stopped. We need to find a way that these projects continue. In some instances, the recipe, let's say, for sustainability is the private sector. That's what we feel, that's what we think, and that's what why we are going to insist, for instance, on our programs to support farming and nutrition, on helping the farmers to create companies that can sustainably derive a livelihood and a profit in a sustainable way. And employment. When you make a profit, you continue. A farm doesn't need a lot of support from government. If the farmer is efficient, if the crops are good, if the weather is fine, farming is sustainable. Now there are accidents that happen. There are climatic difficulties. There can be a drought. There can be too much water, and then you can have mechanisms to support those who are affected. That's what we have in Europe. But farming, I mean, the private sector, the existence of a market, the fact that the people involved have the qualification to run a business, to manage accounts, to understand the basics of trade, of profit, of expense, etc. This is what we want to do.
Okay.
Liberia can be an exporter again. Cocoa, for instance. Liberia has very specific varietals of cocoa, which are among the best in the world. So on cocoa, what Liberia needs to do is focus on the highest quality product. You will never compete with the big producers, with Ghana, with Côte d'Ivoire, with a lower quality level of production, because these countries are way ahead. And the problem is that the world has evolved a lot in the last 20, 30, 40 years. While Liberia was at war, the other countries were investing and developing. And today, Liberia has to catch up, and the rest of the world
And the
will
world
not
is more competitive than ever before.
The world has never been so competitive. Absolutely.
Now, Mr. Ambassador, just before we can delve into another aspect, I was about to ask about all these monies that the EU spend. Where do they come from? Are they EU member state citizens, taxpayers?
Alors, there's been a change in the system until 2020. The money came from the budget of the member states,
Okay.
and they pooled.
But
that-
obviously, it comes from the taxpayers.
It comes from the taxpayers. All the money comes from the taxpayers. Until 2020, the member states financed a common fund called the European Development Fund, and that's where the money came from.
Okay.
Today, the European Development Fund has disappeared, and the money comes directly from the European budget.
Okay.
And the European budget is financed partly on what we call own resources. That are, for instance, the duties, the import
Yeah, the
duties around
trading.
Europe. They go straight to the European budget.
Okay.
And what doesn't come from these own resources comes from the budgets of the member states who financed the rest. Each has a key of contribution, which is in proportion of its population and wealth.
Okay. Now, Ambassador Laurent Delahousse, you have been in Liberia heading the EU delegation for 2 years now. You've witnessed a couple of elections, including midterm elections. What is your impression about our democracy, or let's say our political interplay?
First, I will say that the biggest success of Liberia is peace. Coming from where you come from, the fact that after 20 years Liberia is at peace is a tremendous achievement, a tremendous success of the successive administrations and of the people of Liberia. And that is absolutely essential. And I really feel what His Excellency the President insists on when he talks about Liberia, when he talks about achievements, when he talks every day, every year in his annual address to Congress on the state of the nation. The first and most important achievement is peace.
Okay.
Liberia is a vibrant democracy. It's a model for many other African countries. It's one could even say maybe an exception in some cases, because your country is a true democracy. And there again, the president insists every time he speaks. He did it again at the United Nations, rightfully. There is no political prisoner in Liberia. And I mean, considering the posts I've been French ambassador to, I can tell you that this is also a major achievement. For me, discovering how your democracy functions is a marvel every day. It's very specific.
It's unique.
It's unique. It's not completely unique because your constitution is very much inspired by the Constitution of the United States. And that's also a very specific, interesting fact, up to a point where one could wonder if there are not things in your constitution that might be changed, because are they really adapted to a country like Liberia? Is it necessary to wait 3 months before the election, between the election of the president and taking into office? In France, it's 5 days. It takes 5 days between the result of the election and the new president taking over. So do you have to wait 3 months? In case of the president being reelected, it's not a problem. In case of a change of president, it's a bit of a problem. You have a lame duck president for 3 months. You have a new president who's not ready, and in a way, there are 3 months lost in the governance of your country. That's just an example. It's not a criticism. It's just a constatation. But really, the way Congress works, the way Congress exercises control over government policy, control over government, this is exemplary of the work of a democracy. One specificity maybe that we've seen is the fact that your political life seems to be organized more around strong personalities, individuals, leaders, than around ideologies. In a way, that's a good thing, because it shows that the political class and the people of Liberia agree on the essential. They agree on democracy. They agree on the separation between the state and the church. They agree on the liberal organization of your economy. They agree, of course, on peace and that. That I think is an essential component, which is very good. After that, the rest is politics, and I do not comment on politics. It's something that I'm not qualified for. It's something that I'm not responsible for, and it's something that if I open my mouth, I will blunder, and I will have problems with some individuals.
Don't worry, Mr. Ambassador. I'm going to ask you about your highs and lows, but I have one very well-known lows for you, and I will remind you about that particular low. But Liberia decides 2023. What is the plan from the EU with regard or respect to observation?
Alors, there are two plans from the EU around observation. We have recommended, as the EU delegation, for the EU to, like they did in 2017, to send an observation mission to Liberia. In conversations with government, I have understood that the government is favorable to such an idea. So therefore, there will be a mission coming from Brussels to Liberia at the beginning of next year, probably in February and March.
Okay.
They will decide, or they will issue a report to say if it is possible, considering the security conditions, which are very important, to organize an observation mission. I have no doubt that they will say that it is possible because the security situation in the country is good. And from then, it will be for the government of Liberia to write to the EU to request, or to invite, rather, to invite an observation mission. And we will pick it from there. But I would say
that would be at the request of the government?
Yes, it's at the request of the government. It's the government who invites. It's not the EU who imposes itself. Like when I was posted to Zimbabwe, I took my office there in 2013, just before an election. There was no EU observation mission because they had not been invited. We don't invite ourselves. We only go to observe elections at the request of the government in place, of course. Of course.
So what's the next plan?
The second plan is, of course, to support the National Elections Commission in the preparation of the election and beyond. And so we are working on this. We have a consultant at the moment. I'm actually meeting with the chairperson of NEC around lunchtime later this morning. So we are preparing a program that will be implemented with the UNFP. And that will continue and support the action that is already developed by the Irish and the Swedish governments and others, of course, the United States and other development partners of Liberia. But all of us will bring our support to NEC. And I want to say here that we have full confidence in the technical capacity of NEC to run this election. There have been issues around the procurement of biometrics. NEC just announced that the registration process was delayed a bit because of that. That happens, we understand that. But once again, there is full confidence on the part of the EU, its member states, and I guess the diplomatic community on the capacity of NEC. Liberia is in good hands to run this election, and the technical aspects of the preparation of the election should not be marred by political debate. I think all stakeholders need to get together to support and help NEC to foster progress. And I know that NEC is meeting with the political parties, probably as we speak this morning. This kind of regular consultations, the political parties are the main and first stakeholders of any electoral process, and so there needs to be constant discussion, open discussion and debate between the organizer of the election and the participants in the election.
Okay, then before you want to interact with Liberians, will you appreciate that?
Please.
Okay. But before we do that, I will ask you a very personal question. What will you consider as your highs? In terms of achievement as EU ambassador to Liberia?
Oh, it's difficult to say. I would say that I don't know if it's a high, but it's a pleasure. Certainly for me, is to have developed a very good relation with so many stakeholders in the country. from members of government to, of course, fellow diplomats, but that's easier. But also with members of the public, with economic investors in the country. It's building a network of relations that makes life very easy. When you need an information, you WhatsApp someone.
So the EU is more visible than ever before.
That I cannot say. I cannot say. That can only be said by others. All my predecessors have done a tremendous job in Liberia. We all have our styles. We all have our defaults. I may be a little too talkative sometimes. Sometimes the words go beyond my thoughts.
So you
know
yourself. You know yourself very well.
I know what you're going to refer to.
Yeah.
But I mean that's yes. Despite I think the style of a person is important.
Is that a trait of a diplomat?
Some
To be a talkative
diplomats
sometimes?
some diplomats are more outgoing than others. Some are more talkative than others. As long as it's done with the full respect of the
Okay.
people you're talking to. There is this pun about diplomats which say that a diplomat will tell you to go to hell in a way which makes you enjoy the trip.
So, Ambassador De La Ruz, let me ask you about your law. What would you consider as your law?
I referred to it already. I think my main law is that on one occasion about the garbage collection in Liberia, the words I used went beyond
Was
my
that one
thinking.
of your tough moments?
That was
Because you were embroiled into a controversy, huge one.
yes.
Did that make you
I,
unpopular with Liberians?
I think it made me popular with a lot of people who said for
I
once
said unpopular.
unpopular. Yes,
Did that make you unpopular?
it made me popular. On the contrary, I think with many Liberians who told me you were absolutely right to say that because that's the situation. But it is true that as a diplomat, I should not have used those words, and I expressed
Yeah, you
it
did apologize.
in a communique.
Yeah.
So that was definitely my low moment because I was not a good diplomat that day when I used those words.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you for being so honest. Thank you.
Pleasure.
You can now call us on 07705818886 or 0800514-096. Let's hear from this person. Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning.
How are you? Good morning.
I'm fine. What's the name?
Yeah, my name is Joe Wellington Water Thomas, and I'm activist. I'm calling from Old Road at the Legal Association of Liberia office.
Let's hear you.
I want to say congratulations, Mr. Ambassador, and we appreciate the support from the EU. And I want to say thanks to the support to the Spotlight, the fight against SGBV in Liberia, and the fight to end all harmful practices against women and young adolescent girls. We are also grateful to the EU for the support of the SRHR program in Liberia, and also learn more on how we as CSOs and marginalized groups that are very passionate about agriculture, because I heard him talk about the issue of nutrition. And I want to say thanks for the TVET support across the country.
Okay.
So my key concern is how we as CSO can engage and be able to support the issue of rice production and cassava development.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's hear from this person. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Morning. What's the name? I'm fine.
My name is Sharon. I'm calling from Sokini.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to tell you, Pastor, thank you for the topic discussion. But I want to get in contact with Pastor. How can I get in contact with you?
You go to the EU headquarters office. Thank you. But let's hear from this person.
Good morning.
Good morning. What's the name?
My name is Michael Bidor. I call you from Pont County.
Yeah, let's hear you, sir.
Thank you ever so much for the interview. Basically, you have hit one of the whole year that I wanted driven. Because he spoke on issues that I like, and he spoke like a diplomat. And one of the three factors you carry him, that one of the words he used, and he was blunt, he said, sorry. But I see some people, when they make words, they don't say sorry. The diplomat made it clear, and he make my day. And he talking about TVS, he talking about electricity. All these things can help Liberians. But people come in with all kind of, see a brilliant idea, and you talking about our peace, and moving leader coming again, back onto the society. So he's tough.
Okay.
I think I really understand.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Let's hear from another caller. Call us on 0770581886 or 0800514-096. We can take one more call from the ambassador, and then from callers, then we can go back to the ambassador for response to these concerns. Morning.
Well, I'm Christopher Kenneth, calling from Saintsville this morning.
Let's hear you.
Well, firstly, I would like to thank the ambassador and for his splendid deliberations. But one thing I noticed, that the EU supports smallholder farmers, and in Europe, they do merchandise farming. I don't know what they can suggest to the government of the Republic of Liberia to get involved in merchandise farming and support them. Since indeed they are supporting agriculture. That is my question to the EU ambassador. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now we will go back to Ambassador De La Hoz to respond. Ambassador De La Hoz, you listen to the callers.
Yes, thank you very much.
Some commendations.
Thank you very much for your nice words about the action of the European Union in Liberia. It's always a pleasure to be appreciated in what we do. One question referred to how do we work with CSOs, and thank you for asking the question, because this is something I forgot to ask. To answer or to say in the beginning of the interview, how the EU works with our partners, our implementing partners. I mentioned the fact that we receive a lot of spontaneous requests for financing that we cannot answer because that's not how we work. The way we work is that on the priorities that I have described, we will launch calls for proposals. We will publish on our website in the various sectors that I mentioned, calls to potential implementing partners to write to us, to send us an expression of interest and send us a detailed plan in how they would like to contribute to the objectives of the programs that we are implementing. And if they are selected, then we can start working on the detailed way to work together and the financing that they can receive from the European Union to implement the programs in question. So it's not very useful for potential stakeholders to write to us with lots of proposals. It's better to wait, to keep watch on our social media, on our communication, and then reach out to us if you see that if you're working on nutrition and there's a call for proposals, there will be a call for proposals on that sector, then you write to us and then we engage in a conversation based on specifics. This is how we will work, and there will be many sectors in which, despite this focus and prioritization that I mentioned, we will continue to support, and in particular you mentioned marginalized groups, LGBT, the disabled, people living with disabilities. Definitely we will continue support our programs with the CSOs working in these sectors. On farming, smallholder farmers, mechanized farming, this of course will be part of the type of support we will determine with the Ministry of Agriculture, but we will inscribe our support within the farming policy that is decided by the government of Liberia.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, what a perfect way to end there, but I thank you so much for being on the Super Morning Show this morning.
It was a great pleasure, and I wish you all good, and I hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, do you like the interview?
I loved it.
Will you love to come back again?
Absolutely.
Well, he's EU Ambassador Laurent De La Hoz. He's been my guest here on the Super Morning Show this morning. My name is Vafle Kamara. You can join the team tomorrow for another presentation. Bye-bye.